All right. The horn always gets me. I don't know. I like to make myself laugh, and that does it for me. I am here with Jason Hobbs of Hobbs and Friends. We tried to get this going a bunch of times, so I'm glad it finally worked out. But he's here to sell me on low fantasy gaming. But before we do that, Jason, give me your role playing game backstory. What is your RPG background? How'd you get into it? All that good stuff.
Well, how long do you want me to talk about this, I guess?
You can stretch out as long as you want. I mean, I got to leave in an hour.
All right, so an hour. All right. Well, I started in 1978. The first edition we were playing was Holmes, but nobody cared back then what we were playing. You just played whatever you got. I can remember when the first books came out, like the first advanced books came out, when Beck Me first came out, all those things first came out. We just added them to our game. It was I mean, I was only 8 years old, so I can't say that I was the game master or anything. It all started with one of my older cousins, boyfriend, I think, at the time. And the guy who ran the most games at the time was my cousin Hawk. And I'm pretty
That's
excited
a
about
badass
that.
name for a
Well,
cousin.
it's
My cousin.
it's not his
Hawk.
first name. It's
Oh,
not his first name. It's his
thinking
nickname.
like
But
Spencer for Hire, Buck Rogers, a lot of good Hawks out there.
He's had it since he was in high school. But I mean, he's like 115 now and still started playing in my games again. So that's a pretty cool full circle thing. I think I played a lot, obviously when I was younger, and probably took some time off after second edition started to get a little crazy. And right when third edition came out, switched to hero system and played like a lot of champions then with some guys that I knew from work. And then after, I don't know, 15
2E
years
didn't
of
give you
that-
enough crunch. You're like, I need more crunch. Let's go over the champions.
Well, in some ways, I don't think it was crunch necessarily. I think it was more with just no mini games and just basic systems that seem to make sense, as opposed to like Gary arbitrarily saying, "Oh no, elves shouldn't be affected by ghouls." Okay, well, why not? At least in hero system, you could make stuff exactly the way you wanted it. So I really enjoyed that. And then in the G plus days, I started playing more of an OSR game. So getting back to our roots, maybe.
Did you dally with fourth and fifth edition, or
not with fourth edition? I did mess with fifth edition, and I tried to run it for some of my bros a while, but there's just too much going on. I'm a control freak when I'm running games. So if I don't know what's going on, I don't really feel like I am, but that's my excuse. That's when I started podcasting, probably. I'm wearing an old school shirt to my boys from DSR. I don't know if you ever heard of this. Drink, Spin, Run.
No, I hadn't, but I'll check it out.
Yeah. Don Stroud, who is a writer extraordinaire and just wrote one of the Plangent Mage, I think, for the OSE box set for the Kickstarter. He's the guy who wrote that. And
cool.
he was one of the co-hosts of Drink, Spin, Run. So that's now, I mean, I had my own podcast, Hobbs and Friends. Pretty sporadic these days. I'm just busy most of the time with work. You know how my schedule is.
Right. Indeed.
And I mean, then I started running a lot of games online, which is mostly low fantasy gaming and old school essentials.
All right, so let's get into it. Now I mean, we talked about this before we started, but I remember at least as far back as G plus, which I feel like is going to be one of those demarcations people point out. It's like during G plus or kind of after G plus. I know that there was low fantasy gaming presence on G plus in various forms. I don't know how old it is. Maybe you don't know either.
I do actually.
Oh, you do?
I have this version, which is the Low Fantasy Gaming original version, and you can get this as a free PDF.
I got that, and I did link to it, folks. So if you want to check it out, you can go to drive through. It's completely free.
This is 2016 version.
2016. So we're probably looking at like the second kind of not the first phase of sort of retro clones, but kind of that second phase, maybe a little bit after.
Well, this is after 5e for sure.
After 5e and everything.
Yeah. Sure. So DCC was 2013.
Okay. So now we're getting the time frame. So did you? So I guess I'm thinking. So when you picked or when you found Low Fantasy Game, there was already a sort of a landscape of different OSR games, right? Lamentations would have been there.
Oh yeah,
DCC was there.
heck, almost all of them really. I
Labyrinth
mean,
Lord, all the main ones are there. So what
oh
what
yeah,
what had you
Swords and Wizardry.
gravitate Swords and Wizardry? So what was the thing that kind of picked this one out of the bunch in
So the
terms of
first thing that gravitated me towards this was actually the setting called the Midlands.
you were
All right.
prepared, which I
I
appreciate.
was, man. I pulled this over and I thought, why not? We'll be able to show some stuff off.
Absolutely.
The Midlands was a really cool sword and sorcery feel setting.
Did that come first? Was that something that
Yep.
pre-existed?
Well,
Okay.
no,
Or about the same
probably
time?
not.
All
Because it
right.
doesn't even say Pickpocket Press on here, I don't think anywhere. It just says Steve Grodzicki on it. So it was before he even like maybe had the demarcation of his
But I mean, in
actual
terms of low
brand.
fantasy gaming, did he have the setting that was kind of generic first, and then he built low fantasy gaming, or did it come reverse,
I
or
don't
did
know.
they come at the same time? Oh, you know, okay,
Well, this is 2017, it says. So
all right,
copyright 2016. So maybe about the same
about
time.
the same time.
But I had checked out the Midlands a few times on drive through, and I was like, oh, this seems really cool. And then when I actually finally got it and I started reading it, I was like, oh, maybe I'll check out this game. So I guess that's how it started.
Now, what is it that you like? And I say I don't know anything about. I think I mentioned it. I think something else I mentioned. I've probably downloaded this PDF a half dozen times, but just never got around to the top of my reading pile. What is it? Does it use a kind of a retro clone system, kind of your D20? Does it do 6D6s? Like what is the resolving mechanic in low fantasy gaming?
So it's similar to old school D&D. Well, it's ascending AC. It's roll high in attacks and roll low for any check other than that.
Okay.
So, and then you have like your different polyhedrals for mostly like spells or weapon damage.
Same generic stats and everything, strength, dex, that sort of thing, or did they do anything different?
Close to that. He's broken up wisdom into willpower and perception. So you actually have a perception stat
Oh,
as opposed to just rolling your wisdom to see if it happens. And like it also has a skill system, which is super simple in my opinion. So every skill is connected to one of the attributes. And if you have the skill, you just get a +1. So, if your dex is 15 and you're trying to do acrobatics, you now need a 16 or under. That's it. If you don't have the skill, you just roll your straight dex and then you would see. So anyone can do anything still, but it just kind of
right.
adds that.
So you just get a little bit of extra to it.
Right.
Are there different levels, or is that it? It's just a flat +1. If you either have it or you don't, kind of check the box.
That's it. But it also allows you to use the reroll pool if you have the skill. So
Ooh.
everyone has a reroll pool, and you have 1 point per level.
And at one point you just spend a point to reroll something?
Yep.
How often do you get them back? Is it just a per level thing, like you have 3 for level 3 and that's it, or like a?
No, he uses a short rest and long rest. The short rest only takes a few minutes, but the long rest is multiple days. So
Okay.
anything that requires a long rest, you basically have to be resting for a long period of time to get that stuff back. But you can choose what you get back, and then you have to make like a willpower check in order to see what you get in your short rest.
Oh, that's interesting. How do you like that?
Well, at first I liked it, but it was kind of really difficult to explain because it was like, okay, you get 3 checks per short rest between every long rest, and you can use 1, 2, or 3 checks on each. It was really confusing, but when he released his Shadowrun retro clone called Low Life 2099, I think is what it's called.
Okay,
He
I saw
changed
that
it
on
just
the website.
to yeah, he just changed it to 2. So you get 2 checks every short rest, and then there's a chance that you can get like half of your hit points back, or maybe 1 spell level of spells back, or a reroll pool point, or a class attribute skill, or whatever you want to
I
call
do
it.
like the strategy of being able to kind of pick, like, these are the things that I want back this time, and it's kind of neat. You're not going to get everything. You will, hopefully you get something, but you can kind of try to pick and choose. It's kind of a neat tactical thing. Do I try to get back my hit points? Do I try to get back these abilities? I really need a spell potentially. Seems pretty cool. So what is it about that? Yeah, go ahead.
Good. I said it was just it's making players make more decisions, which I think old school players especially like, and I think any player really likes to be able to make decisions and not just feel like they're just at the whim of whatever's happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're definitely hitting. There's something with that mentality. I don't want to say like older players versus newer players, whatever. But there is a thing like I feel like that maybe the players that gravitate to say fifth edition don't like these things. I seem to be putting like impediments. I could just see some fifth edition players saying now, like, what do I got to roll? Like, why, why am I
Why
at
don't
the
I just
whims
get
of
it?
that dice? Why don't I just get it all? Versus, I think other folks who maybe have different experience, like me with kind of always feel like with old school, wizards, I like that mini game of I got to pick the right spells to memorize. And when you
Hmm.
nail it, it feels really good. You've nailed it. And yeah, when you don't nail it, you can feel useless. But that's kind of to me, that's part of that game. It's like this is why I play a wizard because I'm going to try to outguess what I think the world is going to throw at me, and either I'm going to do really well or I'm going to do okay, and then or I'm going to do poorly, and then if I do poorly, then I just got to figure it out. But there's definitely a certain mentality for players who are going to be like, "This is awesome," or "Oh my gosh, why are they just throwing more stuff at me?" Was there a particular thing about the mechanics, either that system, something else that is kind of what drew you in, kind of holds you and keeps you coming back?
Well, I mean, the whole package I think is really powerful for me. I mean, I'm an old school guy. I've been running games, for 40 years or whatever. And so, but I still, a lot of people say that I'm a story gamer because I don't mind having players have a little bit of narrative control sometimes. So this game really kind of rides a sweet spot between like the OSR where you have no control and then maybe a newer narrative type style game where you do have some control. And it does it through this thing called exploits, which is the biggest one, which are similar to like Mighty Deeds, maybe from
Hmm.
DCC, if
Okay.
any of your fan base would know what those are.
Yep, I
So,
did a video on Mighty Deeds, so hopefully
okay.
people watched
All right.
it.
So yeah, basically during a combat, you have two types of exploits. You can do a minor or a major, and you narratively have to kind of say what you're doing, and then there's like mechanics that allow see if it succeeds or not. Basically,
Is it something that's only in combat, or can you do it for things outside of combat?
it's specifically made for combat, but I have used it. I have just tweaked it in different situations to use it out of combat.
And what do
So
you like? What do you feel like it does for your games? Like, do you feel like your players really embrace doing that, or like what do you feel as opposed to? I think some people say with a lot of things like, well, I don't need a mechanic for that. I just do
just
it.
do
The
it,
DM just do it.
right? Which
Which
is
can
what I
work.
would say. Yeah. Oh, yeah, it can work. I
But
mean,
at
you've
the
been
same
doing it
time,
for
I feel
years,
like
right?
when you put it in, when you kind of make it a mechanic, I think it really sets it down in a way that gives it an authority that you don't
Yeah.
have to. If you're going to a table and somebody's playing the game, you don't know how much they're going to give you on that. If it's just something that's kind of supposed to be part of the culture, or whatever, right? You don't know. Like, is this person going to be doing that? Like, I feel like that's the thing that comes up with what's the thing in fifth edition, that meta currency
Inspiration.
inspiration. You don't know how like you can't go to a game and understand how this GM is going to use inspiration. Do they allow it? Do they give it out? Are they going to give it out just a little? Like, you have no idea because it's just kind of left out in the ether. Whereas I feel like when they write these things down and they put it in the rules, it really kind of says to you, the player, that this is something you can and should do. And of course, it says to the GM, this is something that you can and should allow or play a certain
Right.
way. So for
Yeah.
your game, like how have you found it? Something that you feel like if it wasn't there, would you feel like it would be missed? I guess is
I
maybe a
think
way to put it.
so. I have to say that some players probably use it more than others. And once you kind of get the hang of it, you start to do it a little more because there's more than just that. There's also rescue exploits where outside of your turn, your character can rescue another character from harm. It also has, like, I call it being codified, right? We have these rulings, not rules, that have existed since the beginning of tabletop role playing games. But you never, like you said, you never know what kind of GM is going to do it. And unless they have this massive house rules document, you sit out at the table, you don't know. But if you're coming into LFG, they're going to have these exploits that are there. And then you can, use them to enhance the game through a player having more control over the narration, I guess.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Is the rescuing, is it healing somebody, or is it doing something more tactical, like swapping
No,
positions, or what does it do?
it's actually even more tactical than that. So you and I, you're playing the wizard Todd, and I'm playing a warrior Hobbs, and uh, the owl bear just whacked Todd with a claw, and did enough damage. And I'm like, no, I'm going to actually uh, I'm going to actually use a rescue exploit. And so even outside of my turn, as long as I fit within the mechanic of this rescue exploit, which is you have to be within 30 feet, you have to make a dex check in order to get there. And then you have to make a luck check in order to succeed. And so if it happens, then it just retroactively removes that attack that hit Todd, and we go from there.
Oh, very cool. So here I've been told, ask you about luck. All right. So you mentioned that the exploits check uses luck. So what is luck?
Luck is another attribute that you have, and it's basically 10 plus half your level. So rounded down, I guess, because you don't get another one until you're 12th. So a luck every time, it replaces saving throws, and it's also this resource that you can expend. It's not like DCC where you add the luck onto something. What it actually does is you make luck checks for saving throws. And it can be modified by your ability modifier from whatever attribute you're using. So, and this is like it, for example, if a dragon's breath is breathing on you and the GM says, all right, I think that's a dex, or they could ask you, how are you trying to protect yourself from the dragon breath? And if they say, oh, I'm going to jump out of the way. Okay. So now we're going to make a luck dex check. So if you haven't used any in your first level, you have a luck of 10, your dex is 15, you have a +2. So now you need a 12 or under to succeed on that saving throw. Or luck check, basically. And so every time you succeed, your luck goes down a point.
Even for saving throws, or just so
everything? Oof. Every time. Yes. Even
so your luck is running out. Wow.
Yeah. And then you have to use luck for the rescue exploit, for major combat exploits. There's also a party retreat mechanic. So when you get into something tough, because it's unbalanced, right? We're not making balanced encounters in this game. So party may have to retreat. And so now he has a codified mechanic for the entire party retreating, as opposed to however you might do. Oh, you have to make the initiative roll. You have to win initiative to get away.
So when do you ever get it back? Or is it one of those that just keeps draining until basically you have 0 and then you're not so lucky anymore?
I don't actually know, to be honest. I'd have to look it up. I think you're supposed to get 1 point of luck back every once in a while or something, maybe longer than a long rest. So it does. It kind of, and that's also something you're going to, manipulate as a GM, depending on the type of game you run.
Magic Fountain, has a chance of returning you.
Yeah. Or luck. You do something great. I mean, you could get a point of luck if, you defeat a Daedric Prince. If you're playing I've just been playing Elder Scrolls Online. That's why I was thinking of it. If you do one of the quests that defeats a Daedric Prince or helps a Daedric Prince, there could be, you get 1 point of luck, but that could be a permanent point of luck, or it could be, a temporary one to get you a +1, or you could use it however you want to reward as a GM.
All right. The Dave says you get 1 point back at a long rest, or all back at the end of an adventure, which is a vague term. Yeah. I a lot of things use that end of adventure. I get it, because we all know, you kind of know when you got to the end of the adventure, you beat the big bad, or you did whatever, and you're kind of finished, right? Mm-hmm. And then it seems like the way this is set up, you really can't take long rests. It seems like the long rest is kind of set up for at those kind of segment breaks, right? So if the full adventure is defeating the cult of Orcus, then after your dungeon, you kind of go up to maybe level up and take some time off. That's when you can hit that long rest. I do like that. I know the 5e gritty rules kind of bring that in. It's kind of having long rest stretched out over, say, a week or something, which I appreciate. It gives you, I'm always a fan of things that slow the game down, which sounds weird. I mean, not mechanically speaking, but in the fiction, I feel like too often in games, people are speeding off that the world doesn't really get a chance to breathe.
Oh, and, yeah, for sure.
So I'm really down for things that say, hey, you want this back? You got to spend a week in the village, and if the orc army's marching, then it's a week closer, and that's just the way it is. Or you press your luck and head back out.
You could. What was I gonna? Oh, I was gonna say there. I didn't mention that the magic, actually, when you cast a spell, it uses this thing called dark and dangerous magic, which is sort of similar to the magic roll for DCC again.
Okay.
So your DDM might start at 1, which is the dark and dangerous magic way we say it quickly. But every time you cast a spell, you roll on that, and if you don't hit 1 or less, then the spell goes off either way. But there's no other effect. But that goes up every time you cast a spell. So and also if you use a magic item, it can go up. And there's very, very few magic items. And in some places, you may do something as a GM and say, hey, this is a heavily wild magic area. So every time you do anything in here, your DDM goes up 2 points or whatever. You can just manipulate the character sheet in that way. And if it does roll, then there's a whole different table for the dark and dangerous magic effects.
Do they do the DCC route and have a different table for each spell, which I always find a little bit overkill?
Nope, they don't. It's exactly that. I agree with you. They give everybody Mighty Deeds, and then the Dark and Main, it's only like one table.
Nice. I really wish if DCC, I feel like if they could have just tweaked that, I mean, they always still can, and just make it per school. I like the idea of having a specific table for necromancy versus whatever, but I just don't need one necessarily for each specific spell. I mean, it's great when you just have a couple spells, but then if you want to make your own spells, do everything, it just feels like it's just piling on a ton of extra work.
Work for sure. Work. I wrote some stuff for David Beatty's new book, Weird Frontiers, if you've ever heard of that. It's like a
rings a bell. So maybe did you post it somewhere, or did I? Maybe I might have just seen it.
I don't know. It's popular. It's finally coming out. It's like 900 pages or something. But you had to like write all these spells, and I was just like, oh my goodness, you need some more writers, man.
I know. And then can you imagine if you had to write a table for each one of those spells? Like
that's it. You do
good. Oh, good grief. Oh, his is a DCC book, so he's got to.
Yep.
Oh my god.
Yep. It's a weird.
I would just be like, book. See the fire.
Oh, but then he's got like 5 different spell casting classes in there. So there's like alchemists and like gadgeteers and
oh my gosh. So the low fantasy and low fantasy gaming is specific. Is it referring to magic? Is this what we're talking about, like a low magic game, or what is when they mean when they say low fantasy? What exactly are they? Because I feel like there's different. I feel like the definition, and maybe just in my mind, has shifted a lot. So I felt like back in the day, and you can let me know if I'm off on this, I feel like originally something like high fantasy was Lord of the Rings, right? Where you had kind of the high part was the kind of high heroism, right? You had Gandalf, you had these guys going off on this quest to defeat the large evil. And then I felt like the low end of it, though I don't remember ever seeing it, say, in the bookstore, going to like low fantasy, would have been the stuff that's very kind of ground level. You're almost your sort of Conan-like stuff, like guys who are just doing things for their own good. Like that was the kind of high and low. To me, it was just the heroism factor. So in some ways, like Game of Thrones for me would have been classically like low fantasy as opposed to high fantasy, because they're not kind of highfalutin ideals. It's all politics and stuff now. But I feel like it's shifted. So now that high fantasy is really referring to kind of high magic.
The amount of magic.
The amount of magic. And then
like Eberron, is it low fantasy or is it high fantasy? Because you're not really super powerful magic like you would be like Sauron or Gandalf. But it's ubiquitous. There's magic everywhere in almost everything that you do.
Right.
So which is it? I hear you. It's shifted like everything else has.
So when they say low fantasy gaming in the title, are you referring to magic, or they're referring to the kind of heroism versus kind of mercenary business?
Well, I think that everything that you really like should have some flaws. And so we have found the flaw for low fantasy gaming, in my opinion, is that it's a shitty name.
It is very generic, right? It's just
right. Like, and then people look at it and they're expecting like, I'm playing Arthurian England where there's like no magic hardly at all or whatever. And there is some magic in here. There's a magic casting class, there's all these things that have magic, but overall the feel or the aesthetic of the game is magic is strange. Magic is normally not condoned in any society. And in some societies it's, outlawed in the setting, in the implied setting in the book, basically. Does that help?
I mean, I don't know. It is something that it's kind of unfortunate. I mean, look, the name of my channel is Hex Press, and I had no idea about like hex weights. So that when I search for myself on Google, I got all this stuff about people weightlifting because there are hex weights, and they'll talk about hex pressing, like doing like weightlifting stuff. And I'm like, gosh, if I'd known that before, I probably would have picked something else.
I like it.
I mean, I still like the name, but it's just like from a, I think of it from a, to differentiate yourself, or kind of like, hey, this is us, right? Because when you say low fantasy gaming, one, it means a bunch of different things to a bunch of different people. So you come to me and had asked me low fantasy gaming, and I would kind of vacillate between, well, it might be low magic, but it might also mean like grubby mercenaries versus heroes and things like that. So
I think it probably edges more towards grim and perilous. As opposed to epic fantasy, like a Tolkien.
Right. That's maybe that. Right. I think epic fantasy is probably the best word. Right. So I think my original thing of or at least what I remember from kind of back in the day of high fantasy was more like what we would say now is epic fantasy. Right.
Hmm.
And so then you got the name of your product, and there's automatically probably going to be some amount of people who are going to see that and dismiss it just because the name doesn't match up with what their perception of that is, which also might just be changing because that name is so generic. It's going to
Hmm.
be bouncing all around. And I think now it seems like people really seem to dig these very idiosyncratic titles. It might shift, but like things like Troika, like what does it really mean? I don't
Nothing.
know, but
Yeah.
do it, or it's the name of the setting, or it's kind of Electric Bastion Land, like all these kind of really sort of funky titles. Mork Borg, which isn't, I
Ultraviolet
suppose,
grasslands.
Ultraviolet Grasslands. I mean, Mork Borg just gets away with it because it's in Swedish and the name sounds cool and different in English, whereas in Swedish it just means, I think it's just Dark Tower or something. So
Oh, there you go.
in its native language it's generic, but in English it feels really different. And I think maybe I don't know if to say it suffers for that, but it's one of the less. I mean, you go into, like, say, I don't know, the OSR subreddit or something, and it doesn't pop up maybe as much as other systems, and I feel like maybe the name doesn't help.
I totally think it does.
Um,
A lot of my grognard friends, they're like, I'm not playing some game that's called low fantasy gaming, and there's a character class. It's a magic user. It doesn't make any sense. And that is like verbatim of one of my buddies, and I'm like, you're dumb. But anyhow,
Yeah,
it's like a
don't judge
cross.
a book. Don't judge a book by the name or the
That's
cover. Right?
right.
That's the
That's
thing.
right.
Don't
I
judge a
mean,
book by the
it's
name or the
true.
cover. How is the magic? Do they? How do they? Because something I really liked from Lamentations of Flame Princess was I loved, especially the summoning spell, because it really had that kind of magic is weird and dangerous. And when I ran a Lamentations game a few years ago, one of the players, like, they were a magic user and they had summon, but summon was basically their just last thing that they would try. They would be like, I'm going to summon something and then immediately run away because it was like, I don't know if we're going to live or die, and it could be my own creation. It's going to kill us. I don't even know what we're going to get. So I just want to, like, have it come up and then we'll just take our chances. But it was like, that was like their nuclear option. Like, I don't know where I'm going to get, so just get ready to bolt as soon as this thing appears. But
Well,
it
there's
always kept that kind of real cool, fun, and different, where even the magic users fearing their own magic because they don't know what they're going to get, right? Does the magic system in low fantasy gaming kind of, how do they, other than sort of the that kind of dangerous magic thing, is there anything else to try to bring that kind of feel of magic being kind of weird and crazy and dangerous?
I don't think, not to that extent, not to the extent of summoning an LFG. He has like changed the names for more evocative names. So instead of like magic missile, it's called unerring lash, and like instead of sleep spell, it's called insidious slumber. Um,
I
but
like that.
I don't. Other than that, there are like one of the things that really keeps me in the LFG in low fantasy gaming, which is funny because even LFG, when you say it that way,
Looking for
usually means
game.
looking for game instead of. So you're kind of screwed both ways with this game. But the community of low fantasy gaming, there, like, some of the people are in the chat right now that I invited from the LFG Discord server. The guys who you keep on showing what they're saying, the guys who actually know what they're talking about, other than me, those those, those are the guys. And one of them, that one, Goblin Scribe Gaming, that's on there, he has a whole kit. He's got a whole book with character classes. The class tool. Here you go, Brad.
Oh, there we go. Is not to switch topics too much, but is it easy to homebrew stuff? Does the system? It seems like it's fairly straightforward,
Uh,
right? To add your own stuff
for
to.
sure. I say I use the Midland setting, and in my traditional campaign and the West Marches campaign that I run, I use the Midlands, but I mean almost everything else I write is just homebrew stuff. I don't usually write classes, but like any monsters or anything, when you look at a character class, it looks like a fifth edition character class, kind of, because just the abilities that you get, and they increase as you go. But instead of it branching off into two different subclasses for each character archetype, it allows at every third level, you get this thing called a unique feature,
Well,
which you
okay.
can either create yourself, or you can pick from the main book or the LFG Deluxe book or from the LFG Companion. And it can also allow you to do some cross class stuff there. Like a fighter could have some spells or whatever just from
Oh,
that
very
unique
cool. Kind
feature.
of prestige, classy. I think I want to say what Shadows of the Demon Lord had something similar. I felt like where you reach certain plateaus and you could get a little
Mm-hmm.
something extra. I think
Yeah.
that's always nice. I really like the prestige class concept, which I think this feels like has a little bit, but just not the kind of. It never turned out the way in like third edition, I think. the way I kind of expected it to. Like I thought you'd go from something like, oh, I'm a warrior, and then you could kind of prestige class into like a Templar or a knight or something. It would kind of mean something. Like the
Hmm.
prestige part would kind of play into it, but I felt like they just used it as a way of doing like extra multi-classing that I don't know. I probably got to go back and look at it, but I always remember thinking like, oh, like that's all that is. It's not something a little bit more like a way for you kind of bring the world in or do some other kinds of things. But it is what it is. Someone mentioned here, I would have highlighted, but we kind of moved past. We could maybe go back that they felt like uh, LFG straddles the line between 5e and OSR. Do you
Yep.
feel like it is it one of those things like it straddles the line? I don't want to say in a good or bad way, but like you were saying, it's called itself low fantasy gaming, but it's got a magic user, so it's kind of
Hmm.
like is that thing where the OSR folks are going to be turned off by the 5e isms in there, and then the 5e folks will be turned off by the OSR isms, or like how does it kind of blend those two?
There are going to be some of both of those because it's definitely the mortality rate is higher than I think most people would consider for a 5e game. And the character optimization, maybe even though you have the unique feature, maybe not the same as fifth edition players. And there's obviously a lot more 5e than a true like OD&D player is going to see, so they're going to complain either way. But for me, yeah, for me, it does a great job of doing those things like because it does codify a lot of things that like a BX or an OSE GM is going to make up, right? They may have shields maybe sundered as one of their house rules. Well, this has a similar rule right in it. It's codified. It has all the mighty D's. It has you can try to do anything you want, but instead of like a GM just making it up like in an OSR game and then not being consistent, possibly in this game, there's rules. There's a codification of it. Okay, you have to do this or this or this, and then it succeeds. There's still a lot of wiggle room for the GM, so they're not just like
It's not a massive codex of like a
no,
million
no,
rules,
not
right?
even
Like
close.
it's
It's
just
like a paragraph, if that.
yeah. I mean, I think that there's something like, especially if, and I'm assuming from it, it seems like that the rules seem to be pretty well thought out and they're implemented well. Because I mean, there's a certain thing, there's part of the whole rulings of rules, which is great. Is sure I can blend it, I can make things for my own table. On the other hand, there's also this I feel like a little bit of a competing concept, which is does each GM need to remake the wheel? Like if someone's got great rules for drowning, like why not put it in the book so everybody
Mm-hmm.
has these great rules for drowning, as opposed to leaving it for like, oh no rulings, and so then everyone's got to fumble around trying to come up with their own rules for drowning. It's like, no, I had a really great set of rules,
Mm-hmm.
just put it in there. But
Yeah.
maybe it's just that, and I was talking about this on another forum. I feel like AD&D, as far as like old school D&D, right, doesn't get as much love from kind of OSR being renaissanced or being touched up or being remade. I know that there people have cloned and stuff, but I feel like because it's the DMG's just got all those rules in it, right? But at the same time, it's not like old games didn't have rules. I mean, sure, BX didn't have a lot of rules to it, but there were lots of games that had plenty of crunch, and sometimes that crunch is for fairly good reasons because people
Yeah.
needed those rules. I mean, in terms of like the crunch scale overall, like how do you find it with LG? Do you find it's got like a ton of rules, or does I mean, or I guess just where would people say like, "Ooh, this is really crunchy," or would they say not so much, or somewhere in between?
So I have actually an anecdote when I was just
Mm.
at a convention in Minneapolis recently called Con of the North. I was playing with some guys that I know from the scene or whatever. Uh, Julian Burnick, some of you guys may have heard of him. He's on a podcast called Spellburn for the DCC. Judge Julian, also known as my evil nemesis. Anyway, he was playing. I played in some of his games, and he played in my LFG game. And he felt like he never played it before, and he thought there was a lot of things that he liked, but he felt like it was fussy. So, and this is the very first time he'd ever played it. And I mean, he plays DCC and he plays AD&D, but to him it felt fussy. But to me, it's like, I mean, I don't know. You show up at a con game, you've never opened the book before. Anytime the GM is saying, "Oh, you could do this, this, or this," maybe it feels fussy. I don't really feel like that. Like I GM'd Hawk. We went from OSE where they TPK'd like he lost like 9 characters in a 12 session campaign. And I'm like, hey, maybe we should play this game. It's a little more survivable. And he loved it. He thinks it's the greatest thing. So I think he just kind of
It's
feels
hard
like
to judge a
knowing.
game from a con. I mean, if it's got any rules at all and the GM's making you do stuff, it's gonna feel if you've never seen it before, it's probably gonna feel fussy or whatever. Like you really have to kind of. I mean, I just feel like that just takes time. Why would you expect? I think even with something like BX, if I took BX to some people who had not gamed much before, like I took say my wife and one of her friends, say, okay, we're gonna sit and play Basic Expert. I'm sure the
Well,
first
really, you'd
time I
only
had
take
to,
basic, right?
right, you
Or
just
expert. You wouldn't need both.
right.
Just kidding you, man.
No, no, well, you're right. I mean, say I'm just gonna play basic. We're just gonna run in the dungeon. Like I feel like the first time I get to saving throws or anything, they would feel like, oh, there's like so
Oh,
much going on, or like, what's oh now I gotta roll this. What are these numbers over here? Like it would seem
why do you
odd to
care how
them,
long my torch has been going?
right? But to us, we go like this is like the easiest of the easy. You know, like this is if this is complicated, but it's all it's all in the
Yes.
context. Was there any particular system that they felt like was kind of the fussiness thing, like from a playing perspective? What?
Well, I think I mean, so it's just all over it because continuously, if you've never played a game before, something happens like you roll a 20. So in some games, that's like some kind of nat critical hit, or it's all home brewed in BX or Beck Me or some old games. Well, in this game, it just says you hit it, roll that 20, you just do max damage. Or like if you roll a one in those games, it would just be a critical fumble, and then the GM makes up something funny and really makes your character look incompetent. Really, in this game, the opponent that you're fighting that you just attacked just gets a counter attack, but just explaining that felt kind of fussy to him, right? So, but I'm like, yeah, you do the same thing in your AD&D game all the time. It's just a new game, and you're just being contrary. So,
Speak to me about segments, and then we'll go back to talking about fussiness.
yeah, or armor weapon types versus armor.
That's one of the things I keep saying this. I just need to discover because I use for my home game. I'm just on Discord, and we're playing essentially kind of my modified basically basic with some kind of heavy mods on the player side of it. But I really love the concept of like weapons versus armor. I just think that's really cool. The concept, like if you as a fighter walk in and you see a guy wearing heavy armor, you turn to your like retainer and say like, hand me my mace because my sword's not good here. Or this
Yeah.
person's doing that, so I need like I just love that. But I don't want to deal with the like the extra table lookups or having to remember, oh, this armor, this and like this. And I felt like if you could get that stuff into VTTs where I could be in Fantasy Grounds, Roll20, whatever, I don't use them, so I don't really keep track, and they could automate all that stuff for me, so we could just still do the like, we're just gonna drag this attack to this person. It's gonna do all that stuff in the background. I just think that would be amazing. And because I think there's so many games like that that have that amount of crunch and stuff that conceptually I love, but just in practice, I just go, I just don't want to, either I don't want to deal with it or I just can't bring myself to deal with it. So I don't want to do it like segments. Like I would love to do combat with segments and stuff, but I probably should go back and read it again, but I don't know. I just feel like that's just more work than I want to do.
I've played it with segments. We used
that,
to use weapon speeds in
the weapon speeds, but if I could
second
have all that
edition,
stuff automated, so it would just be like next initiative order would just kind of come up and it would just be like boom, and and players would do stuff and stuff would be grayed out if they didn't have enough segments in the round or however whatever it would work. Like I would totally check all those boxes. If there was like if I could go to Fantasy Grounds AD&D and it would take me to the page where it's like, here, how many of these DMG rules do you want to engage with? And I could just go down the list and go all of them because it's going to automate it. I just don't have anything to automate it on my side. But I mean, I know somebody said that they put a bunch of AD&D stuff in there, and maybe they have. I don't know, but it seems to me that, like you're saying, like anything with any amount of rules is going to have some kind of fiddliness to it until you kind of get that kind of click over moment where it sort of makes sense, and you hope that the rules will have this point where you kind of go, oh, now I understand it, and so then it becomes kind of second nature to play. Some folks were saying that they'd find a kind of medium weight, which probably makes sense.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I would say most people consider it more than like a BX, but definitely less than a 5e. So like it rides that line in many ways.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting the 5e because one of the things that was kind of I don't want to say it was a little bit of like a light shining moment for me was talking to somebody who had tried to teach some new players something like Basic Expert, maybe it's OSC they were trying to teach versus 5e, and how the players picked up 5e a lot faster and they had a lot of trouble, and it was because of all the different types of dice you were going to use, which I get, right? Because if you're playing a thief in BX, some of your things are percentage, other things are like D6, other things are D20, and like which are which and why, and though you can logic it out and explain to somebody this, okay, this is why you're using this one. I mean, ultimately, do we know why? Okay, percentage because they wanted extra numbers. Like, oh, you could have done that another way, but they didn't. Whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
Versus 5e, whereas there may be all these complicated systems, but at the end of the day, when the player is just like, I just want to know what die to roll, it's you can just tell them it's always, unless unless you're rolling damage, it's always your d20, and you always want high. There's not sometimes high, sometimes low, sometimes like it's that's that one, and that for really new people just helps a lot,
Yeah.
And I know people in the OSR love to talk about the love of over why certain things work the way they do and how wonderful it is. It's like, yeah, that stuff's great, but I think it makes it a real chore for people who have no idea about the histories of those things at all to just
and don't care.
They just want to play. Just want to play the game.
Yes.
They just want to play. Let's see. I'm gonna go here.
I was gonna say, you asked me
go ahead.
I don't know if I mentioned it, but they are talking about it in the chat. There is a great community around. I wouldn't say it's the best in the community. I would say it ranks up there. DCC has an incredible welcoming community, and so does Low Fantasy Gaming. I would say there's probably more third-party products for DCC, but it's been around at least 3 years longer than Low Fantasy Gaming has. But like I showed Brad, like Goblin Scribe things. The Dave is Wiki Snapper. He has a product out that's very sleek. It's for equipment. And then I think John Perez is like, he has ores and stuff that he does. So, I mean, and they're very, very welcoming. You're not going to find a more welcoming group. They don't make fun of you because you don't know why you roll under on your skills or whatever. Just, they're not going to. It's just super nice and welcoming.
Oh, that's really good. No, it seems like, you're just mentioning different things. It's good to see that support because it is important. I think that's the other thing people look for, which is kind of what is, I think not that it matters because obviously at some point the OSR was all about bringing these systems that were somewhat, I don't know if it's dead because there was always people playing them, but just in terms of there was nothing to something, right? But I think when you go somewhere, you're looking for a game to kind of, I don't know, build your hobby around. Like, I really want to, you want to see something that has people involved with it. If you go somewhere like nobody's commented on this thing for 5 years, it kind of feels like, like maybe I should pick a game that people are actually playing, especially when it's a role playing game where you need to play with other people most of the time. So, finding a game where you're bound to be the only one playing. When you're selling LFG, I don't know if you going to if you run games at cons or if you run games kind of publicly, when you go about to kind of elevator pitch LFG for folks who may be stopping by your table or whatever the situation, when you kind of say like, why play this as opposed to playing something else? Like what do you tend to sell them on as kind of the big thing for?
Geez, it makes me want to open up the book and see what it says for. He's got like,
open up the book.
He's got like his 8 or 10 things where Steve, says it. Steve has played in my games and I've played in games with Steve. He's in Australia. Super awesome, high energy guy. So if you ever get the chance to meet him, you should definitely do that. So what he says is the rules are simple. So it's just like you said, when you're fighting, you want to roll a high on a D20. When you're doing anything else, you want to roll low on a D20. Pretty engaging, fast and engaging combat. Almost everything it does. There is might be some hit point blow a little bit, but it still seems fast to me when I run games. It's dangerous and gritty. So you really do feel like survival is one of your main functions. It's not necessarily a lot of other things. It's not just looking for gold for XP or whatever. It's really surviving and completing whatever goals you have in front of you. Quasi-realistic world. There are rules for demi-humans, but most of the games are human-centric. Treacherous magic. So magic you can't always trust. It makes bold adventures. The game is written. It's a complete game. It's not like DCC, which is not a complete game. It does not have any rules for wilderness exploration, or there's a lot of games out there that aren't complete games.
DCC doesn't have rules for that. I confess I've never read it completely, but the book's like 9,000 pages long, and
well, that's because it's all those spells, man. It's all those spell tables. But yeah, so this has rules for overland travel, and it's got random encounter tables. It's got mass combat, naval and sea adventuring, how to make monsters, extensive trap explanations. So it's a complete game in one book.
What do you think? So folks have been trying, I think, to help out gosh, Tonio. I feel like the more I say that name, I'm just gonna butcher it. So I'm just gonna stop there. Tonio,
Mr. Prado.
Mr. Prado. There you go. How to find about to say looking for game Discord, the low fantasy gaming Discord. I think. I think that the Nightbot, who is our enforcer in the chat, as folks who've been in this chat know all too well, may have blocked the pointing of the URLs. But if you throw it to me on if you throw it to me on Twitter or whatever, I will throw it in the show description so that Mr. Prado or Ms. Prado, if you check back, you can see it there. Because it'd be good. Maybe I'll join in. I mean, it sounds great. Yeah, Nightbot Cursey. Yeah, Nightbot. Oh no, I've lost. Can you still hear me? Because I lost my audio.
I can hear you, but you're
yeah, my camera. This has been happening a couple times where it's just shut my camera down.
It's just me out here, guys. Just me. So what else should we talk about while we're waiting for Todd to come back? Anybody got some suggestions? I can show some more products.
No, I'm still not coming up. Hold on, I gotta stop the video. All right, I'm gonna stop my video.
All right, so this is an adventure framework, and inside this are a bunch of different little adventures that I don't know if you guys can actually hear me, I guess, but a bunch of little adventure hooks, and each of them has like a map. It has some hooks for your characters to become involved in it, and then it also has like random encounters for the travel there. So if you are ever looking, this is written. This is thanks, buddy. This is actually written for low fantasy gaming, but you can use it for any game. You could use it for your 5e game. You could do whatever. And there's 2 of them that are together. So really cool thing. All right, Todd's back.
I'm back. Sorry about that. But thank you for it. So go ahead, finish your thing before I didn't mean to cut you off there.
Oh no, I was just talking about the adventure frameworks.
Well, speak to me of these adventure frameworks.
So you can obviously get a PDF. I have hard copies, but there's probably 10 to 15, maybe 20 adventures in every book, and every adventure has multiple hooks for your characters, multiple NPCs to interact with, random encounters for the journey to wherever you're headed, and then it'll have the site location itself. So, and you can, like I say, they're written the way they're written, you could use them for anything.
Nice. Oh, we got some questions here. So first, Elfbait wants to know, is the adventure, you may not know this, is the adventure Patreon still going?
It is not, I don't believe. So
okay.
He was writing these adventures on his Patreon, and then he started writing adventure frameworks for Low Life, the Shadowrun clone. And right now he's actually working. I don't know if I'm supposed to say what he's working on.
Uh-oh. All right. Hold on. He's working on something. They're working on something, but the Patreon is not there. And then Marcello asks, where can we get the adventure framework? Where are they on drive-through, or are they somewhere else?
Yeah. Pickpocket Press is his imprint name. So find Pickpocket Press.
Yeah, I saw that. And that has links. It also has a link. I didn't know what it was until you mentioned, but I guess a Shadowrun retroclones I'll have to check out. Is that just decking for hours? Like, okay, so your main party will meet up on Tuesdays. Meet with your decker on another session to cover decking activities. Wow, how do you get all these lovely books?
So pretty.
Good golly.
Steve likes me. Well, and I also like pimp Steve stuff everywhere I go. So he'll send. I have this massive
Steve,
banner.
if you listen to this, I'm happy to accept hardware copies of.
If I get to 1,000 subscribers on my YouTube after this, I'll convince him. I'll send.
Oh, nice. Where are you at on your subscriber journey?
517 or something.
All right, folks. Well, I know there aren't 500 and people watching, but those of you who are watching, go subscribe. Go to my community tab. I did use the little highlighter thing to link Hobbs, link the to Mr. Hobbs's channel, so you can find it from there and subscribe.
I have not ran Low Life yet, but I have played in a few games by one of the other GM overlords at the Low Fantasy Gaming Discord. His name is Zach Hydra, and he has been running some pretty awesome stuff. Well, he will be.
Man, you got Hawk Hydra. You've got like.
I don't mess around, Todd. I'm telling you, man.
Is it using the same? Is there basically
Yes.
this? Okay, so like mechanically underneath the hood, the same chassis, if you will,
Yep.
for both.
Yep. It definitely does. It still uses exploits and it's still using high on a roll 20 to in combat and low on like ability checks.
Do you find it plays similarly? Or, I mean, given that you're in Shadowrun versus whatever, like, because one of the things with Shadowrun, I loved Shadowrun. I think I had first or second edition back in the day, which I've sadly lost, but I really enjoyed it. But things like decking just taking forever. I mean, that was a known thing. I think
Mm-hmm.
until I think even fairly recently. I think even maybe later editions, it's still a problem. And then the dice pools could get kind of insane.
Right.
For something which is sort of fun on the one hand, but then it's just there's that point where you just get that ton of dice. How did they mitigate those issues, if you recall? If you don't,
Oh, hey, Hydra is actually in your chat, man. I didn't even realize that. Oh, say, okay. So what I would say is that the decking that I experienced was very quick, actually, because it was mostly just trying to affect something in the near environment. And so it was just kind of like an ability roll to see if it worked or
okay, so
not.
you're not like going in and maneuvering through a virtual space with black
No,
ice and all that.
but I think it does abstractly that the black ice can affect you and things can happen because every what I haven't mentioned, I guess, is every skill roll in LFG or the pickpocket press games. There's 4 outcomes, not 2. So it's
Oh,
not just failure or success. It is total failure, failure, success, and great success. And those are all figured out by one roll. So it goes by your stat. So like if your stat is a 12, then a great success would be say under a 6 or under, and a total failure, because we're trying to roll under at this situation, would be like an 18 or above. And so like you can have different outcomes from that single roll.
nice. Someone said that low life is even more dangerous.
It is, because I don't think their hit points go up like they do in low fantasy gaming.
Is it now? Shadowrun was fairly high magic in terms of right. There's if you to paraphrase and butcher Shadowrun lore, like at some point I don't know what year it was supposed to be, but then there's some
I
kind
think it
of
just happened
magic
in real life.
opolyx and
Yeah.
apocalypse or whatever, and then all the magic's back, all the demi humans are back. I think even if you were born at that point, like if you were living when that happened, I think you just like you some kind of inner demi humanist might have sprung out to you. Because I think like people just turned into orcs or dwarves or whatever.
Elves
I
or
think if I
whatever. Yeah.
remember, like it was just like that was just part of your being. It popped out. So there was the magic. The world just became re-imbued with a buttload, and that's a technical term, a buttload of magic. So given that low fantasy gaming, the magic is not by the
Oh,
buttload.
dang.
Did they do anything to change it, or does? And there's my lost me again.
Yes. I would say that so what he did is he took his Midlands setting and advanced the timeline up. So you still have all the same demi humans that you may have or may not have in the Midlands. And I'm really curious while we're waiting for Todd to get out and I can see the chat, but I wonder, you can see the chat though too when you watch this back if you choose to. How many of you guys out there are? Oh, he's back
I'm
already.
back now. Go ahead, finish your thought.
I was just going to ask how many people were here from the Low Fantasy Gaming Discord. I've seen at least like 4 or 5. So yeah, Minotaurs is a class. I don't know if you heard while you were working on that my answer or not. That he basically just fast forward the timeline for the Low
Mm.
Fantasy Gaming, the
Oh, okay.
Midlands setting, and then he kind of made that into his Shadowrun setting.
Oh, very cool. So they tie together. Can you are they compatible in the sense that you could like I don't know, get into a Klingon starship and zip around the sun and end up back in the Midlands and go to town with
I imagine. I mean, there is sorcery. I think that you could probably do that if you want. Zach Hyder was probably going to do that in a future game. I think. I don't. I'm just
get your
talking.
monofilament whip and go to town on back in the day.
Yeah, yeah.
Any game you could play. Lonely D12 says any game you could play a Minotaur hacker is bloody ace. Hard to disagree with that one. Hard to disagree. I really have a soft spot for Shadowrun, but it was one of those things. I was living overseas and I had access to come back to the States only a couple times a year. And I would, when I was here, I didn't have anybody to game with. My sister was too young, and I just didn't have any friends where I was. So I would buy these games and I would just digest them. I would just read them just over and over and over and over again, and then I would have very little success often actually getting to play them when I would get back because I had a friend group at that point, but not everybody cared for shit. Like I was super interested in Shadowrun, but not a lot of my friends were,
How much is
or
that different from today, Todd? I mean, I look at this shelf. I don't play all these games. I read these games and I don't play them.
The difference now, is I would have like months of just me in this game, because I'd be here for summer break, right? So I'd be here from July, end of June or middle of June, whatever, until the end of August. And so I would have, if I got this game at the beginning of, say, July, I would just have 2 months with just me and the Shadowrun book and me just reading it and rereading it and rereading it. It's the stuff that I think that you hear about now where I look back. This is where I can understand where some of the, I see more with fifth edition just because fifth edition is the game du jour, right? Is the people who like make 8 characters and like, oh, I've already got my next 12 characters made. Because I remember going through that, just like making Shadowrun characters, making Marvel superheroes characters with TSR Marvel, just making more, and I would get those extra powers source books, and I would just make characters and make characters. I have nowhere to play with them. I would just kind of look at them and then wonder, ooh, can I do something different? Can I like just that sort of. It's a fun game. I think the difference now is just that now I have a bunch of books like Low Fantasy Gaming was. I don't even get a chance to read them. They just sit in the pile, and I hope that someday I'll get to them. Which I guess I don't even know what I was trying to say, but these games that we pick out and then kind of languish, I guess, to bring it full circle is kind of where this game was for me. So I definitely appreciate coming on. Is there anything left to say about that or about the sci-fi one? And I keep, every time I see someone in chat saying LFG, I keep saying look for game. I don't know why.
I told you it's kind of a cursed name in multiple ways. They need
to come up with like their own acronym, like I don't know, low fan or something. No, that doesn't sound. I don't know. That's something.
We call it LFG. It works for us.
So. But what do you do in the LFG Discord when someone is LFG? What do you say, like LFG? Like
it says looking for game on the channel.
Well, you got to make a sacrifice somewhere.
I've probably ran 2 or 3 campaigns of Low Fantasy Gaming online on my YouTube channel. And I also have my Midlands game, which is an open table West Marches game. And so I've adjusted the rules a little bit just to fit in that. So, because every session starts at a safe place and goes back to the safe place. Right. And I can tell you that it easily runs as smoothly as my OSC games of the same type. But I feel like players are actually more involved in Low Fantasy Gaming than they are Old School Essentials, because all the players kind of have a few more things that their character sheet might help them figure out, plus all the codified rules where they know what's going on, as opposed to they never know in an old school game.
Did you ever play with really like powerful. The OSC advanced stuff? Did that make any difference? I've never gotten into OSC because I already have the books. I have basic expert, so like I don't need to go, OSC, but I know that there's advanced, which I think brings in a lot of the AD&D stuff, but
that's
kind
the
of
attempt,
retrofit a little bit to be more into kind of a basic expert style. Did you ever dabble with that, or?
Yeah, I mean, I have a bunch of OSC books here. Gavin sent me the rules tome to begin with and the big box set, and then like I got all of the advanced stuff. I mean, in all honesty, as far as the rules go, I don't think it hurts to increase like your spell list or have some. I don't really like the character classes that much personally. I don't feel like they add a ton to the game, but people still like to play them because they're different than the other ones. It's nice to have advanced treasures, to have more magical items if you're in that sort of game, because it isn't a low fantasy, a low magic game, right? It's kind of a higher magic game usually.
Let me, before I excite, I know I need to be cognizant of time, but what is the kind of is there an assumed sort of end game? Is this like that leads into domain management when you get to high levels? You just retire? Is there a power? Is the power curve different so that a 10th level LFG character is not kind
we're
of
back to LFG.
Powerful?
Okay, you jumped on me.
I want to remember to get that in there before I forget, and then we shut things off, and I was like, oh, I totally forgot to ask about that kind of.
I don't think there is an end game where you can draw people and have a monastery. I'll look real quick though. I'm just curious because
some games they
definitely go for that.
They kind of I guess they sort of set the direction.
At 10th level, a bard has a network of informants. And there is some domain stuff in this book, plus the LFG companion, which is the companion to the LFG deluxe book. I think the fighter or the barbarian becomes a chieftain. So yeah, there's definitely an end game, but I don't think there's any levels. Like I think 12th is as high as anything goes.
And
Is
in
that
and is as far as the kind of generic OSR compatibility, how much conversion do you need to do to get something from, say, an OSE to LFG? If
like
one
what
were
am I
to
converting a monster usually? You think
monster, or just if you're looking at running, I don't know, and I don't even know really names of OSC modules. Was there one like hole in the floor? Is there something like hole in the oak
there
or
isn't,
something?
but there should be.
Hole in something, whatever. Like there's some OSC adventure that strikes your fancy, and you're gonna run it with your LFG game. So like how much, and I guess to what extent do you have to convert? Or is it just easy? Is it easy to take a monster from OC and just run it and kind of know what you have to change? Is it you just have to go in and kind of tweak it up?
Well,
Like, is it
you could run it as is, but I would say low fantasy gaming characters are slightly tougher than OSE characters of the same level. And also, like every monster, if you roll a 19, they usually have a special effect that they do, just like
ooh,
every weapon type that characters have. On a 19, they do something special usually. So that you would probably have to make something up like that. In all honesty, I've made them up on the fly. So I don't feel like it is that difficult. Someone may have written one. I don't know. May have written a converter, but he
yeah, I was
uses
just curious
different
because it's just one of those
dice for hit
things.
points, but
Okay,
it's
yeah,
and it's ascending versus descending.
right,
But OSE has both, so that's not that
yeah.
tough.
And I feel
I
like if you've played any kind of OSR games, if you're playing old modules or new ones, you've gotten pretty handy at just doing the math in your head to go from ascending to descending, depending on what game you're playing.
yes, and there's enough things out there now that like Swords and Wizardry and OSE have been putting both in for 10 years, right? So
A
you should
nice
probably,
OSR accessibility feature, to be sure.
yeah,
All
man.
right, Mr. Hobbs, we are slightly over time. Hope that's okay. Anything you
I'm
want
good.
to mention about before we
I think
stick a
that I
pin in
put
this one?
almost everything in. I feels like I had thought of something, a link that I should have given you, but my own Discord. I have my own Discord server as
Oh, there
well.
we go.
It's called the Gamerhood. So if you want to hang out and talk with a lot of the Hobbs goblins out there,
Oh,
let me know.
nice. I feel like I want something. I need something like what to call like the community, but I don't have anything as neat built as the Hobbs Goblins. That's on point.
You want me to tell you, Todd,
Trademark
how to
that
get
one.
that?
Huh?
You want to know how to get that, Todd?
How do you
You
get
just ask your community. That's what I did.
that?
It's like sourcing the table, brother.
There you go. I'll have to figure that one out. All right. So sorry, what was the name of the is it just called the Jason Hobbs Discord? What was it called
The
again?
Gamerhood. I call it
Gamerhood.
Mr.
All
Hobbs's
right.
Gamerhood.
Like I'm just gonna put that in the
The
Discord.
Gamerhood. Yeah.
Is it one word, Gamerhood?
Yeah.
All right.
Other than that, I just wanted to say that I appreciate all the stuff you're doing. It's good to see people talking about hex crawls out there and helping out running games and playing games and just be involved in the in the, sorry, that made me laugh for some reason. Just being involved in tabletop gaming as a positive focus is admirable, and I appreciate you for it.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. Thanks. I just try to do what I can, and yeah, and there's so many ways, so many different things we can all be negative about. I think there's enough people out there who want to do that. I figure I just try to be good. And yeah, and I just try to, encourage the kinds of games that I like to play, I suppose.
That's what we should all be doing, right? I forgot one thing.
Oh,
I do have a podcast that we haven't put a new one out for a long time called Hex Talk, which
yeah, people have mentioned Hex Talk.
Yeah, which has branched out of Hobbs and Friends. So if you want some more information and maybe a different perspective by 3 other dudes other than Todd, you can go listen to some Hex Talk episodes. They're pretty funny. I mean, you never hear me say anything intelligent. I'm just usually making fun of the other two.
I mean, my skill has been to learn how to blather on for an hour every weekday, and folks come in and try to make sense of what I'm trying to spit out. So I feel you on that one. Yeah, it's the whole community thing is interesting. I'd love to have, like, I don't know if people are interested in like behind the curtain kind of talks. I feel like it'd be one of those things that'd be really neat to have people. Do people care about what it's like from this end of things, doing this side of the screen, if you will, to do stuff or not? Because I feel like I've been lucky enough now that I feel like there's a set amount of people that seem to show up for these things that I'm not talking into the void, but
Mm-hmm.
you're putting on a podcast or doing anything, there's always that moment you're starting out where you're putting something out there and nobody's listening.
Yep.
And you kind of got to persevere and just say, well, nobody's listening or watching me, but I'm just going to keep talking like someone is watching, and hopefully people will watch. I feel like hex crawls get talked about a lot now, which
They do,
is good.
which is surprising considering 5 years ago
I think it helped
wasn't
5e
hexes,
put out, right? 5e put out, was it Tomb of Annihilation has a fairly heavy hex crawl element in the middle of it. So I think that helped bring focus back. And so it's cool, though. It's kind of odd when I see people out of the woodwork with like a hex crawl video and they've got like tens or hundreds of thousands of views. And I've been sitting on hex crawl videos. I'm like, I know, okay, I don't know if mine are as good as theirs because I haven't listened, but like, show me some love. But you can't do anything about it. Can't, just gotta do your own thing. But hopefully you'll get some subs out of this so we can get you over, at least get you over the 1,000. Hope you get you over the 1,000
plateau.
mark.
I would appreciate that. I also want to thank all the people that I put some shout outs on all my social medias, and there's quite a few people in the chat here that are engaging with us that are from different areas. I saw my buddy Gabriel was here. This is for you, Gabriel, DSR, buddy. So
awesome. Well, listen, thanks everybody for hanging out with us for the hour. If you had never heard of Low Fantasy Gaming before, or maybe like me, you had put it in your reading pile, pull it out of the pile, give it a read. There's free rules are on drive-thru, so there's no reason not to go to drive-thru. At least grab the free rules and check them out. And there's a link to that in the show description, which should pop up pretty much everywhere the video is. Mr. Hobbs, it was great to finally get this out of the way. You're welcome back whenever. We could talk about anything.
Can't wait.
There you go. All right, folks. Have a great rest of your day, night, whenever you're watching or listening to this. Say good night or good day, Mr. Hobbs.
Better to burn out than to fade away.
All right. Oh, and when this drops off, it's going to kind of drop everything off when it plays the outboard video. So stick around if you want to chat for a minute or two afterwards.
Yeah,
otherwise.
sure.
All right, cool. All right, I'm hitting the button. Ciao, everybody.